I opened up the Tribune a few weeks ago and I learned that the state's best tool for affordable housing, the Olean Walker Housing Trust Fund, is drying up. It's almost completely out of cash. And this last year, we had a housing bill that was stripped of all of its funding. What I'm seeing is big red flags at the state level. We are flattening our spending on housing. We aren't keeping up with the cost of inflation, the cost of land, the cost of labor, the cost of construction. We're falling behind as a state.
But what Tim said is correct. And right now, Salt Lake City is doing more for affordable housing than the state of Utah is. And we're doing that in part because I think that Salt Lake City voters have different values when it comes to development. And that includes sustainability, and that includes making sure that there's an affordable housing element to make a place for everybody in our community. So I think that's what's driving the change that you're seeing.
There is general agreement that Salt Lake City is in the midst of a crisis in affordable housing. This is a particularly difficult issue for low-income residents who increasingly struggle to pay the rent, while market rate and luxury apartments are being built at an unprecedented rate. What would be your plan for developing more affordable and low-income housing in our city? And can you talk about the actual number of affordable housing units you would wish to see built as well?
Yeah, when I started on the city council, Ralph Becker announced an initiative to build 5,000 doors. You might remember that one. Now we're talking about more like 7,500 doors. And as our population along the Wasatch Front grows toward 5 million, which it will surpass by 2050 statewide, we are growing here as a city, and the need for affordable housing grows proportionately. We need to acknowledge that the mayor doesn't control the housing market. We do have our hands and can find there are some really key levers. And I think that's a good illustration of why I'm running. I think it's important that Salt Lake City has a mayor who knows how city government works, how to use it effectively, efficiently with our precious taxpayer dollars, and then bring the most to changing affordable housing as we can. I love Salt Lake City. I've lived here through different stages of affordability in my life. I loved Councilmember Gorbani's sharing about her childhood. I was born into a double-wide trailer myself, and my parents worked their way into more stable housing. But unfortunately, we know in Salt Lake City, about 50% of our renters pay more than 30% of their income. That means, and you know this, it's not stable housing for half of the people renting in Salt Lake City. So how do we move those levers better? We've been working on this, particularly since I put together a $21 million fund through the RDA about 2 years ago. We brought $21 million to the private development community to say, we need more affordable housing. We're willing to give you low interest loans in order to make that housing happen. Councilmember Wharton mentioned we've had over 1,500 units created so far, and there are hundreds more in the pipeline that we're aware of. $47 million brought to the table. No city in the state has ever done what this city council has done. And I'm proud to say I've helped to lead on that. But going forward, we've got another $10 million on the table right now of notice of funding availability through the RDA. And when I was the chair of the council last year, we did a critical step through the Funding Our Future conversation. We created ongoing revenue for the Housing Trust Fund that we didn't have before.
Luz Escamilla, the same question to you.
Thank you. So when we talk about low-income housing, and I think what we're, part of my message is we talk about community stabilization. Because we can be in low-income housing, depending what situation happens to you, how many people are literally a paycheck away from, or catastrophic illness away from homelessness, or ending in seeking low-income housing. So part of it has to be this very comprehensive approach of dealing with every single aspect of the city. One is, as we move to inclusionary zoning, making sure this is happening from east to west, north and south. That's a big problem that we have. It will require this collaboration between city mayor's office and the city council to go to the neighborhoods and explain that we need to have this low-income housing and even middle-income housing. Nobody's talking about middle-income housing. So we're going to have this really, really very high price housing and just low income housing, and we need to stabilize that. And so the middle income housing needs to be part of the conversation. No one has talked about that, but that will require this collaboration. And east east and west to combine, not all the low-income housing happening on the west side. And I know that's gonna be tough conversations, and some people don't like being in front of angry constituents, but we need to have it, and I'm trained to do that as a legislator. We deal with all these situations all the time, but we need to attack this from this full multifaceted, every angle approach, but we also need to bring some wraparound services to that conversation, even for the low-income housing. So we do a lot of wraparound services and conversation of case management for individuals experiencing homelessness. We also need that to stabilize for people that are low-income housing, and then look at the different populations. Not everyone is in the same angle, and I have the ability to have experience on all those different angles through my experience, not only legislative experience, but also working in banking with businesses and understanding how some of those services really make a difference in the life of people.
We will turn to the topic of
Can I do
a rebuttal. Sure, yeah, rebuttal from Mayor Mendenhall.
Thank you. Just a few more points. I think that it's critical that we make it a priority as a city, talking about knowing how to use our tiny levers or big levers most effectively. We're recruiting businesses to this city all the time, and the city participates in different ways to support the kind of investment we want to see in the city. But we need to do better, and what we started to do better with Stadler Rail and a couple of others is to bring businesses here that are going to pay better. They're going to pay a living wage. We know that for the average rent today, you got to make $17 an hour. Our average renter makes $13 an hour. Our minimum wage is $7.25. City Hall, not any city in this state can raise the minimum wage. The state's prevented that. But what we can do is target our investments as a city on businesses that are going to pay better. We can do that. We also need to prevent the loss of housing, and Tim mentioned this in an earlier session. We have some zoning proposals from the administration before the city council today that would make it easier to tear down what is currently affordable, naturally occurring affordable housing. We gotta have our eyes wide open about this.
Sure. Lisa Scalia, your rebuttal.
Thank you. One of the biggest pieces we need to also address is the different tools. So we right now are talking about development of housing and affordability. Part of it is we have to bring penalties for developers that want to, destroy affordable housing and build not affordable housing. Then there should be penalties attached to it. And I think the city has the ability to do that. At the same time, we need to be talking about a home repair program. So if you think about fixed income, our seniors that are in fixed income, if those property taxes keep increasing, how are they going to keep up? I mean, we're moving them from maybe a stable housing to now potentially homelessness or seeking other assistance. So part of the work, I think, of the mayor's having the vision to bring all the stakeholders to the table, have this visionary piece where everyone has a different situation, but the city should be ready to work with the federal government, the state, and other municipalities addressing this issue. And I'm excited for that opportunity because as we're talking with all the stakeholders, so many ideas are possible. We just need to get them all at the table, and I can do that. Thank you.
Great. So as we think about resources for the new system, I think we would all agree there are never enough resources, right? And Senator Kitchen referred to that as well. Can each of you identify maybe 2 or 3 places where increased investment could improve the system we're currently reorganizing? So this time we'll start with Zach.
First one's easy. We need a whole bunch more money for housing.
You haven't heard that enough, right?
But I think what was mentioned, the bond, really is the most likely mechanism. So the building housing is expensive, and so the current available options are primarily low-income tax credits, both federal and state, and commonly banks are the ones that purchase those. So it just takes a whole bunch there. Kind of the 2 others, I don't quite know what this investment would, but we need the economy to work for everyone. So wages, if the earned and livable wage was sufficient to afford much of the housing that was being built, that would be better. So I think something in that realm. And then the third, investment in coordination. I think our system probably is getting a little bit, maybe more complex, or it always has been complex. There's efficiencies to be gained in terms of the kind of back-end structure that makes sure we effectively utilize all the resources. And I think that's unfortunately one of the most common areas, and it makes sense. I think what we've done historically is we put a lot of money on the front end of let's get most out to services, and we still should do that, but there always needs to be kind of the structure. And even digging into this data, I think some of the reason why we don't have as much as we need is we need the time and resource and skill to really go and study and make the best informed decisions we can.
All right, great. Sean, what are your thoughts on where improved investments can help our system?
The behavioral health services system, and particularly the substance use disorder treatment system, we have operated a parallel system for housing services to all of this, and it's only actually been with Gene and folks like Bill and Glenn who have started to invite folks like me to the table where housing for the homeless is discussed. We've always served those people, but it's only been in the last 3 or 4 years that we've really been invited to the table. Now, I'm one of those annoying folks in that I understand that there are high-need individuals who are literally homeless, who are costing our system and emergency services and criminal justice system involvement extraordinary amounts of money. And so even in my world where we talk about you dedicate the most resource to the individuals who are the most expensive to serve. And for us, that's individuals with high levels of criminal justice system involvement, individuals who are homeless, all of that sort of stuff. But an individual who is literally homeless and resistant, we need to target them. And that's typically the housing first, and Zach got at what the obstacles to that are. But we've got this low-hanging fruit over here. And those are people who are exiting programs like mine. So 54% of the individuals who enter my program are individuals who have had a shelter bed day night in the previous 12 months, at least one, most significantly more. But that's 50% of 737 people. That's a lot. That's a big end. And if we're able to keep them engaged in treatment at the back end, I've got about 40% of those, of that total, that 737, who have housing need. They need housing. This is low-hanging fruit. And many of them are individuals who could probably find housing in the marketplace. Many of them are individuals who would benefit for a period in recovery housing. Many of them are individuals who would benefit from a temporary subsidy like rapid rehousing. But some of them are individuals who desperately need PSH. So I've got that entire range. And so we need to find, I think we could get more efficient by developing our capacity to be more prescriptive about who we're targeting for different types of housing. And I just think there's an incredible opportunity there to be prescriptive in our utilization. Talking to those people, because we're interacting with them. We've got tons of screening data. We've got tons of assessment data. We know who should go where. But then that gets back to Zach's point that we just ain't got enough. And so we just desperately plug people in wherever there's an available spot. That's not ideal. That's not efficient. I think even though we have a gap, we've still got opportunity and should start to work toward being more prescriptive in the utilization of existing resource.
Great. And Gene, what are your insights or thoughts on where we can make some 2 or 3 improved investments to help improve the system?
Well, I'm good because I think what these two both said is exactly right. I think we all know that housing is going to be a key and different types of housing. So I'm going to take it a little differently and talk about resources we already have. They won't cost us more, but could really help a lot, such as not raising the sales tax on food. We can very simply not do that. And then we have large housing problems in people's budgets. We could raise the minimum wage. We know the wages are stagnant in this valley. if people can't afford housing because the housing is going up so quickly, maybe we need to look at the wage side of things and make sure people are making a living wage. And we could do some policy changes in affordable housing. You know, we have these lovely policies that say if a developer puts in 20% affordable units, they get tax breaks. Well, what do those 20% look like? Those aren't units dedicated to affordable housing. Those are units that, yeah, if somebody who needs affordable housing applies, we'll give them to them, but if they don't, it's a market rate unit. And we don't know what's happening to those units. We do not have within our inventory, and that's one of the things that the housing group is working on, an understanding of where are these units, who has them, and when those folks move out, what's happening to them. So none of those take more financial resources, they take policy changes. So I think those are my top three, and then of course we have transportation needs. With our scattered site model, we need free transportation options. And those are things, again, that there are some policy matters that can help with that. There are some financial matters that can help with that. That's not the most critical need, frankly, because the housing is the critical need, but it is certainly an area where resources are needed soon if we're really gonna have this scattered site model work the way it's intended to.